a couple easy ones, and we'll get into some more interesting things around sorting and filtering. So again, for those who are new to the grooming, the goal here is really just to create a common understanding of what we want to do, and really start to think about these as business ready or business shippable stories. And so within each of these, we'll go through these. We'll want to add details and questions and answer those as much as we can. But then at the very end, we'll come up with a collective estimate based on everyone here, and we'll kind of do a sign of hands. And then once that looks good, we'll go ahead and close that out and then move that for ready to start. So for the purposes today, let's start off on the easy one. So for those who've played around with Benny today, the idea here is we want a little bit more of a robust empty shopping cart scenario. So for those who played around with it, we don't have a button, we don't have the text, but and it's a fairly bleak looking screen. So for those who are interested in contributing, this is a nice easy one to get set up with. Again, the ability to pick up some of the components we've done, be able to make a small integration inside of the cart, and then build off of what again is just really placeholder text in the instance that you click on the cart in Venya, and then you find that the cart is empty. So again, not the biggest one we've done today, but I really want to put a couple small ones in here as our contribution has actually increased quite a bit. I was looking at the reports, and we had 5 PRs outside of Magento this week, and roughly. I would say roughly twice as many contributors in the past 30 days than we did before. So all signs point to that, and we keep getting more requests. So kind of walking through the story itself, fairly straightforward as a shopper. I want to know if my shopping cart is empty in Venya so that I can continue shopping. Assumptions are that you'll be using the checkout that we've already created. You can get that today at GitHub, and that you have awareness of the empty checkout scenario. So it has to be a situation where you haven't added something. Task here, very straightforward. Implement, there are no items screened in the checkout, so that's from Samya. There's a link to the prototype at the top. And of course, testing and documentation as well. So we put a link into the boilerplate, link from James on this one on what this would look like. So hopefully this is very straightforward, but it's a good one for those who are just joining the project. And but want to get everybody's take on this. And first of all, we'll start off with any questions. Any questions on this one? Any comments? All right, I'll take the silence as well understood for that one then. So
I'll hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
So I have one question. It's work only on anonymous user, authorized user, or anonymous too?
It should be. That's actually a good point. So it should be working in both authenticated and non-authenticated views. And so I will let me go ahead and add that to the assumption here. Good point. Great. Any other questions?
Yeah. So Eric, in addition to that, maybe we need to specify like an exact devices that we are going to support. Is it desktop or mobile? If we are going to desktop version, if you're going to support desktop version, we need to specify it as well. So what do you think?
I would think so if this is one of kind of our epics or master stories, but for device and browser requirements, I would defer to kind of our master requirements for that one. So I think we would assume that the needs for this would be no different than what we've typically done for that.
Okay.
It's a good call out, but I think we've got kind of a master. We have a kind of a master set of requirements for that.
Okay. Yes, thanks.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Perfect. So let's go ahead and get to estimates on this one. Again, this one should be pretty straightforward, and so we'll. Just because of the simplicity of one, I'd like to think this is probably a 1. Can anybody make a case for this being any more than a 1 from an estimate standpoint? All right. I'm going to keep this as a 1. Again, this is really just a means for us to kind of get started. I think this one's pretty straightforward. Business value would be that you have more context when you have an empty cart. And I think what I'd like to do is also offer this one up for help needed, and help wanted. So for someone who is new to the project, again, we've had quite a few contributions this week. This is an easy one to get set up. Help us finish up the checkout, and then let us continue on our way. And so This one's done, so we're going to move this one over to ready to start. I will determine the prioritization afterwards. Not top of the list, but something to think about. And so we'll switch gears over now to implement sorting for category with Venya. So for those who are familiar with the category page, so one of the key features on this one is sort. We'll cover filtering second. And so the idea here is to again, as a hold on just a sec. So as a shopper, I want to be able to filter and sort products within a category so that I can make an informed purchase on Venya. And so this is the design from Salmia. We've got an interactive prototype that is related to here, so you can take a look at that and interact with that in more detail. This builds upon the category page that we currently have, but as you can see, when you click on either the filter or sort, those are not yet active. And so the idea would be upon clicking the sort button, you'd be presented with these 6 static options. So price low to high, price high to low, newest. Ratings, which is actually going to be out of scope. That was more of a concept because we don't have the ratings API available for this. And then both ascending and descending sort order for that one. So again, the creation of this slider, this panel that comes up, you're able to make a choice, and then from there, of course, as with any sort, you would be able to see the related items as a result. So. The assumptions themselves, of course, must have a working category page. That should be straightforward. And again, I did mention the rating is not part of MVP. If you happen to be interested in that, and if you could pull it off, great. But we're not expecting ratings high to low on this one. That's not part of MVP. And the tasks themselves is really, again, for especially people new to the project. There's going to be some discovery work on the GraphQL and REST API coverage for products and category. There's the implementation of the panel with basic options. I would say if it's easier to do 1 or 2 of these first and then iterate and do the other remaining 5 to 6, then I think that's fine. And of course, testing and documentation, that'll be something that we would of course link out to and want to make sure that that's covered with Mr. Cal. So that's sort. So any questions or comments on this one?
This kind of obvious question on this, but the assumption here is that the sorting is all done server side, correct? Or via the GraphQL call, you would not be doing any sorting client side.
Correct.
Okay, so any of those options that are not supported by GraphQL would come out of scope of the story. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, and that would be part of the discovery. Again, without having James here necessarily, I can't tell you the extent of where that coverage would be, but I think with just like anything else we have with GraphQL and REST API coverage, there'll be some level of discovery on what's covered and what's not from this. And for this, I think we've got pretty decent coverage. Clearly, with ratings, we don't. But I think as part of that, I think let's make the assumption that the sorting can be done server side, and then through that process, identify any roadblocks.
Can you hear me?
So I can hear you now. Yeah.
So I've been here and talking, and for some reason thinking I was being responded to, but
no, no, we haven't heard you at all. This is the first. Good morning, sir.
My BlueJeans client updated itself. I don't know. I always have some problem. Anyway, I was trying to respond to you, Rowan. Yes, because you're always sorting against the entire collection, then you're not going to sort the window of products that are in memory. So, yeah, Eric, of course, is correct. This is all whatever's supported by the GraphQL API.
Cool.
And now okay, cool. Yeah, just making sure. Oh, God.
Perfect. No, we got you. We hear you loud and clear. So,
okay.
No, that's a good comment. So, Ron, did that answer your question? Anything else on that one that you wanted to call out?
Well, that's all clear.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Very good. Any other questions or comments on this one before we get to estimates? All right. We're efficient today, folks. So estimates, let's go ahead and talk about this one. And again, this one, I'm a little less clear on this one. I don't think it's a 1. Let me just throw that one out there. So what are we thinking in terms of an estimate to implement this? Who'd like to get us started?
So us at Burgreen are feeling either a 3 or a 5, but leaning more towards a 3.
All All right.
And the reason is that we feel like we haven't done the discovery for GraphQL, but I know GraphQL has sorting stuff built in, so I feel like a lot of the work is just kind of done by GraphQL, and it's just a matter of building out these components and using Storybook and testing and stuff. It seems like most of the work with this.
Yeah.
Well,
By the way, nice looking T-shirts. By the way, first time I've seen that video. Very nice. Excellent. I think the 3 makes sense. I'm always a little bit conservative on this one, especially if someone else picks this up. I know a bar green 3 lately may be different than others for that one. So if there's any kind of traps in discovery for someone who's less familiar, I can be a little bit more conservative. But again, I can also be convinced as well. I personally would rather see this as a 3 or 5, 3 versus a 5. But what does everybody else think?
Well, I have a general rule that if there is a new UX primitive that has not yet been created, one that would belong to Peregrine, for instance, that I would add some amount to the story. If you've already taken that into consideration, folks at Bargreen, then sure. But let's take another quick look at the mock, or at the UI.
Yeah, depending on the mock, we're actually. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I think we're listening. We're going back to the mock.
Okay, yeah. So depending on the mock, I'm wondering if we can reuse the selector that we made for selecting shipping and stuff like that for this, but I'd have to look at it again.
It looks pretty similar.
Okay. Well, if you can look certainly in your own GraphQL Explorer, or you can look at the schema to see that there is a large number of sorting options for product collections. I don't know how well they all work necessarily, but everything that I see there, we've got price, we've got name, but I don't see that, certainly not in the Venia data, there is not a custom attribute about reviews, so that would be out, and so ratings would be out, and you could do newest. There's sort of 2 concepts of newest inside the API. There's a merchant controlled new items thing, so if you want to feature some new items that you put in, you can identify them that way. But then there's also sort of a more basic, the date at which the product was created, and both of those are available as product sort input options. The concern that I have that you may run into is that I don't believe that these product sort input options are settable easily via variable. So you may end up having to have multiple queries, which is terrible. But you could probably implement them as a query that pulls in a fragment that is the entirety of the category query, and then create a bunch of queries for the different sort options. That may be what you have to do at this stage. If you have any questions about it, you can consult me.
Okay, that does sound like a bit more work. I mean, I could be convinced of a 5 if we're messing with fragments. I've never touched GraphQL fragments personally, but
it's not that strange once you see it, but it will take a little bit more effort than just using the existing get product detail query.
Okay, so there is a bit more discovery there than we originally thought.
I think so.
Or
I think
like
there's
me
a bit
personally, at least.
Yeah, certainly. Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Well, this is feeling more like a 5 at this point. So anybody like to second that 5 based on the newfound discovery? I feel like we already had, so maybe we consider this a 5. Any objections to 5 before we close this out then? All right. This one's groomed. So let's go ahead and move this over to ready to start.
Love it.
We're in good shape on that. Thank you, everybody. Next one's gonna be very familiar and very similar, and so we're gonna do filtering. So we're gonna carry over a couple of the assumptions we just talked about. So this one's hot off the press, and so I talked to Sami last night, and we've got some additions here on filtering. So this one's again similar to sorting in that it's initiated from the filter action on the category page itself, but you're presented with several different options. Of course, we're assuming these options themselves are going to be sample data driven, so these aren't necessarily static, but these would then present themselves into a series of options. Size is going to be a little bit more straightforward. Color is going to ideally produce a swatch, which I know we started to take a look at that with the product options and product details as well. And then from there, the ability to make a selection and, of course, clear things out on a facet by facet basis. And so this is going to be a little bit larger, I would expect, than the sorting one, but it's going to be an important one for us to take a look at, especially with the larger catalog sizes, where you want to kind of quickly bring down some of the choices you'll make as you're in the middle of that browse functionality. And so that's a preview of things. The link for the prototype will be coming shortly. We're having some Envision issues on the sync for that one, but those will likely be coming in on Monday. But I did want to embed some of these images to talk about filtering from a very high level perspective in terms of the presentation, again, initiated from category, then down to the options, which are data driven, but then the type of mechanisms we're talking about, which are traditional choices, but for color, we're looking for something a little bit more interesting. Quite honestly, I actually think the clearing is more important than the swatches, but we can certainly talk about that at least as we look to iterate this. So the story itself is again, as a shopper, I want to filter and sort products within a category so they can make a purchase online. These should be programmatically based, again, as we talked about. Example, and so this is what I took a look at in the sample data. Right now for Venya, we've got material, style, color, and price. And then the assumptions themselves would be, it is, of course, dependent on the category page, which is done. The ability to retrieve products by category, which will be some discovery there. And then ratings, which are not part of MVP, which wouldn't be because we don't have the sample data, of course, for ratings in that sense. And so tasks are very similar to what we've got here on the sorting. So there will be some discovery work in terms of the GraphQL REST API coverage. Of course, there's the implementation of the panel. I could be convinced that we would split this and look at this a little bit more iteratively. I'm okay with that for that. And then, of course, testing and documentation as well. And so, sorry, there's a bit of a lag with ZenHub this morning. Any questions on this one? I am going to add some of the assumptions from before, but as I type these out, any questions or comments on this particular story for filtering?
Is this dependent on the sorting one, or not so much dependent, but it feels like you wouldn't want to tackle these independently, that these would probably want to be worked on in coordination?
It's certainly true that you'd end up wanting to have a UI that kind of combines or unites them. For MVP, I think it's okay to have two separate workflows, especially because it seems like it'd be pretty easy to put them together. I mean, if, for instance, there's duplicate work being done to create like the UX primitives for the selector or whatever, then we should just kind of call that out in the Slack channel, and those who've taken on these stories should be in communication. I would trust them to do that. It also bears mentioning that for both filtering and sorting, the same concern about GraphQL queries holds true. You have to put together a complex object to specify the filter conditions using the filter input and sort input types in GraphQL, and unfortunately, those cannot currently be specified by variable, which the GraphQL team, I believe, is working on, but I think it's still a case that you might have to do that hack where you create multiple queries.
Got it.
Out of
I think,
the
James, for that one,
discovery, I was just going to say, out of the discovery piece for this, does that mean that you want to have something to ensure that, say, if I have sorted by price and then filter by color, I want to ensure that I've retained my sort by price when I then filter by color? So some coordination on how both the filtering and sorting parameters are being sent.
Yeah, that's certainly a thing.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess things like that, good catch, things like that seem to require, like Rowan's suggesting, that we make these stories dependent on one another. Rather than making them the same story, which I think would expand their size in a way that makes it harder to continue, let's just make one block the other.
I'm sorry, Jane, what do you mean one block the other? What do you mean by that?
I mean that let's wait until the filtering story is complete before adding sort, or vice versa.
Right. And again, I'm not the same level of detail on the API front on this one. It feels like we could probably do sorting first, and then come back around with filtering. But then when you do filtering gets trickier with the existence of sort. I could be wrong there, but if that is the case, we can then make that a dependency here formally in GitHub. How does that sound?
Perfect. That sounds great.
All right.
Just to mention, I have an open pull request for product options, which seems to have a lot of like the UX components that would be used in this also. So that also makes sense.
Okay.
Filtering.
That's a good call, Paul. Let me put that in here as well. Yeah, once that's merged, it shouldn't be an issue, but I want to at least note that in there in case this is done in parallel to that. Cool. Very good. Any other questions or comments on this one?
Just a somewhat unrelated question, but when do you expect this to be started, the story? Like, so we are grooming now. How far in advance are we grooming? So when do you expect, like, with this, we start with a lot? Is it a month ahead, or is it like next week?
You know, it really depends. If somebody from community picks it up, that would be great. This could be done independently of what we're doing. If somebody picks it up a community, that would be part of next month's release. I would argue probably a higher prioritization for some of the other things that we're doing internally for that. But I'd love to see this. This seems to be pretty independent from that. That was the hope, and that might be something somebody could pick up.
Okay, but I mean, so for today's, I'm trying to understand. There are other features. This is not top of backlog, right? What we are grooming now is not top of backlog.
No, there's probably 5 to 8 stories that are ready to start right now. So we're probably roughly a sprint, maybe 2 ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what
It's different math with the community, of course.
Yeah.
Barbara can pick some of these things up. We can get some comrade help here and there, but these are independent. So, yep, a good question. Any other questions or comments on this one? All right, I'm going to finalize the updates on this one, so you guys know what the next question is going to be. How complex is this issue, as Zenhub would say? I don't even dare want to start the number on this one. I don't hear from you guys.
I mean, I make it a habit not to be the first one to volunteer, but I will.
Oh, Anton says 5. He started the bidding at 5.
Right. I would say it's definitely a 5. Yeah.
Based on the sizing we've done in the past, it would be no lower than a 5. That is
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The question would be: Is it with our relative sizing here? Would it be considered 8? If we look at the entirety of the swatches, although those controls are done, does that merit an 8? Are there going to be complexities with these GraphQL fragments we're talking about?
I'm sorry, there's a lot of noise, I think, from Nazar. Would you mind muting?
Hey, Dimitri, we're hearing some background noise from you guys. Can you ask Nazar to mute, please?
I turn off micro.
All right. Perfect. Thank you. All right. So we got a 5 here. Anybody want to second the 5 or raise it to an 8?
I'd say we raise it to an 8 just because of the discovery on the GraphQL stuff, and like there's always testing and documentation to go with that too.
Yeah.
And in addition,
if we do it faster than raise it. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, please go ahead. Sorry.
So I was just saying, in addition, like the new UI, like the clear button, I don't know, just adding in more storybook elements like that if we want to make them these, generic components that can be reused and everything. That always seems to take, a substantial amount of extra time when you're adding in new UI components and the drop-down lists and stuff.
Yeah, that's a good call out, Jonathan. And again, just as the story gets picked up, if we find a case where we want to split this one, especially if we feel like we can do part of this but not the rest, I think that's fair game for this one. So we can reevaluate that one at the time. But I agree with you. That's a new control right there that we've introduced. And so between the creation of that, but then also what we'd want to do to potentially bring that into Peregrine, that's probably some extra work there. So I could be convinced.
Yeah. Okay. So let's put 8 and let's move on. Eric, I will ping you later. I would split this story at least to 4 stories, like search for filter definitely can be something much smaller that can be taken by someone from community, all the different filters. Like for today we have 0 filtering, right? Would it be beneficial for us to have at least some filtering by price? Would after 2 days or wait for 3 weeks until we have all of this implemented?
Yeah.
But yeah,
I agree.
That's focus. Yeah.
Yep, I totally agree. All right. We'll move this over then. So.
Especially taking into account that, if I understand correctly, the estimates we take are not used in planning, right? I mean, we don't plan roadmap based on this estimate.
We do with the internal commits for the community ones. It's more it's not as rigid. So yeah, absolutely. If we find someone's willing to take on part of this, we would split it right away. So yep.
I mean, I meant the estimation.
Yep. All right, so let's talk about. Let me check time here. So we went through the ones that we committed. So let's get to some interesting ones here. And so I want to talk about something Sami and I talked about is we want to bridge the gap with some of the PWA basics that we know we've explored. We've actually done some work in the past on this one, but starting to introduce the idea of the manifest of things, which should be straightforward and universal. But I do want to talk about that as a team because for us to hit MVP, we're going to want to have the basics of this one, which is much more than a capability. And really more of a basic requirement of anyone who wants to consume the studio on this one. So this one is this one again not announced, but this one is the add to home with the capability of the web app manifest. And so by nature of some of the libraries that we're using, the idea here is again to universally allow the easy addition of Homescreen, which I know we have some different opinions on the use cases of this, but for a kit. Someone's going to want to have this. They want the ability to quickly add to the desktop. They want to be able to see, you want to be able to take a look at this. And then this, of course, will improve our Lighthouse scores, where even the creation of the manifest itself will give us about 3 checks on that one. And each one of those is going to give us the ability to install the web app, to configure a basic splash screen based on the artwork from Samia, and of course identify a brand and background color for venue, which in our case is probably going to be a basic white. So I did work out the details with Samia on this one. We do have the iconography, both the 192 and the 512 sizes on this one as well. And then this one would require some basic discovery on the manifest specs from Google, which again, pretty straightforward. I was able to look at a couple of generators and create one myself. I think it's just going to need a little bit of help from James and others on kind of understanding, what are the right parameters inside of this. And of course, finding the right way to implement this. The idea of course, starting off with a single page, homepage is probably a good candidate for that. Verifying that in Lighthouse would probably be the test. And then looking at this globally across all the basic pages, homepage, category, product details, etc. And you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but we've got all the assets here. Again, these are the icons that we need from here. This would just be a basic expectation with any toolkit, and hopefully it should be a pretty straightforward one now that we've got the basics of the checkout experience. But we're going to want to have this one for MVP, and I just want to bring this up for grooming, and this is just the addition of the manifest, but from a business standpoint, the ability to add something to a home screen to be prompted by whatever the browser defaults might be for that. So.
Yeah, so I can say that we have most of the infrastructure in place to make this fairly quick because we have already incorporated a workbox into the service worker plugin, and workbox will provide most of this functionality out of the box, so to speak. Rowan can attest to that.
Right.
We've put workbox behind us, a little abstraction just for our own benefit so that we can later automate some things or provide some sensible defaults, but it's still there, and you can thread arguments through. And it's in PWA build pack, Webpack tools, plugins, service worker plugin. You can see there how Workbox is provisioned, so feel free to use that, do it there, and then it's already wired up to Venia, so you should be good.
Yep. Good.
Yeah, the comments I would have on this are that the actual creation of the manifest is super simple. That should take like an hour for someone to pull that together. The harder bits in here are one, configuring the service worker, because the key thing that you need is to be able to provide a 200 response when you're offline. So I potentially would consider, no, actually, that can be part of the same story, because doing the manifest is so small. The work is creating the basic offline error page so that when I'm on a page, if the connection doesn't fire, I still get some kind of fallback template or message on the screen telling me that we weren't able to connect, and we get a 200 response from the actual URL itself. The second aspect of this is also just capturing the add to home screen prompt on the pages and just having some decisions about where you want that prompt to appear. So it would be fine to automatically show the add to home screen prompt on the home page, but you're, say, not going to want to show add to home screen partway through the checkout process, for example.
Right. Agreed. So yeah, there'll be some discovery there. And then Rowan, I think it's a great point on the offline experience. Again, without, one of my assumptions is that we could theoretically break out the 200 response into a separate story. So you'll see here in gray, before we hit save here, is that we could use this as a blocker to create that offline experience and kind of do two stories in one, where we do the discovery, set this up, and then potentially demo these both together for that. But I'm happy to combine these as well. I was thinking the same thing.
From MVP point of view, because I don't want to slow down your velocity here, having a very basic experience that is literally just, hey, you're offline, here's a default page, is what should be aimed for here, and more complex behavior can be led in later.
Exactly. That makes sense. Thank you, sir. Any other questions or comments?
I'm very happy to be pulled into GitHub discussions on this one as well.
Yeah, I have one question. I was messing around with the Workbox thing yesterday on just a local development server, and it was rejecting my certificate that was generated.
Oh no. So is this PWA dev server the Watch Venia thing?
Yeah, that's the Watch Venia.
Yeah. So we have an open request to kind of settle that up with DevCert, I thought. Let me take a look. But yeah, it's supposed to trust, and the way that DevCert works, which is what's underlying PWA dev server, is it's a little utility that creates a root certificate and asks your system to trust it. And depending on what operating system you're running, it uses different techniques to do it. So what OS are you running?
Ubuntu.
I'm sorry, say one more time. Oh, it's Ubuntu, you said. Okay. So there may not be a trust mechanism there. So if you look up DevCert on NPM, you can see that it uses for Ubuntu. Oh, for crying out loud! Why is everything broken on my computer all the time, forever? Okay, here we are. And if you look in OpenSSL, if you look in the platforms, if you are on Ubuntu, it's going to expect you to have, there's multiple system-wide repositories for certs, and Chrome doesn't. So, okay. So you need to have the cert util utility installed, and it should walk you through that.
Okay, I'll look into that. Message you in Slack if it doesn't work.
definitely, yeah.
So Paul, not to put you on the spot on this one, would you be interested in taking a look at the story if we were to make assignments?
Yeah, I would be interested in looking at it for sure.
Yeah. We got the support of James and Rowan on this one, so if you've already got the hood open, I'd love to get some help on it.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. All right, that'll affect your estimate. I understand that from that, and so I think any other. Let's go through any questions or comments here before we go to estimates. Anything else we want to add here in terms of assumptions and tasks?
Yes, I have one question. You just write other critical area. Can you describe more detail for know what is the critical areas? Can you clarify this?
Yeah, not checkout. On the cap. Yeah, go ahead.
I can specify it. So I can. I have a branch that's kind of already done. I can check in a. I can open a pull request and then you can take over however you'd like to implement it. But critical path CSS is something that you need fully generated HTML pages if you want to auto detect it. So a method that I'm suggesting is to use a plugin, or is to use a file name convention where if you have CSS files that you want to be included in the critical bundle, then you just simply call them .critical.css, and then you have a plugin which gathers those files and extracts them into a single string, which can then be put into the application shell. So after this grooming, I can show you that. It's already ready to go. It just may need some bug fixing.
Oh, I should probably clarify here. I think I shouldn't have used the word critical because that's probably confusing the issue slightly. What I was meaning here is more like multi-step user journeys where the user is in the middle of some kind of action. So the approach I would probably take here is by default, you are just blocking add to home screen all the time, and then maintain some more kind of whitelist for which routes or pages or however you want to specify it, you want them to show up. And that way it becomes a little easier to say kind of like, yes, if I'm on the home page, I can trigger add to home screen. If I'm on the order success page, I could trigger add to home screen. But if I'm anywhere in the checkout flow or partway through configuring a product, I don't want to trigger add to home screen.
Right. Now, that's a good call, Rowan. Maybe can I maybe oversimplify this and be really explicit? Maybe we can whitelist only homepage, category, and product details for MVP, and that's it. With that, and then we're still providing a useful example. I know it oversimplifies things a bit, but that might be just enough to at least get started on this one. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I'm definitely in favor of like doing something very conservative to start with and then opening it up later.
Excellent. Perfect. All right, so it's a little bit more explicit. Good. Any other questions or comments on this one? All right. Well, let's move to estimation on this. So, what are we thinking on this?
Gosh, I mean, with the service worker discovery that's necessary to do this and the workbox discovery, I think it'd be safe to call it a 5. Again, a lot of this gets automated, and I recognize that it's small, but we have some testing to do, and especially device testing to do. So I think it's a 5, and it might even be borderline there.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I would definitely say this is it, unless I've missed something, this is really the first story where you're getting into service worker behavior, right?
That's correct.
Well, we have a service worker, but this is certainly where we get more interesting in terms of manifest. So yeah.
Yeah. So I will just say there will always be interesting surprises inside of that you will hit that will definitely affect this.
Well, I'm excited to start working on it then.
Yay!
Yeah, personally, because it's assigned to Paul, I'm going to say it's a 1 because I think it's super easy.
Yay!
This is not the poker that we were planning. I'm okay with a 5. You know, Paul, I know you with this one again. I kind of out of sequence, but again, given some of your momentum here, let's call it that. But if you have any questions, again, you've got the support of Rowan, James, and others to get this there. I would love, you know, the minute this starts to get a little bit bigger than what we've got, let us know, and let's make sure let's find find the smallest way we can iterate from this one as much as possible. So I'm happy to at least think of this as a 5. If it gets it to be more than that, we can create some supporting stories.
Okay, that sounds good.
I'm trying to save you there from the 1, so. All right. Well, good. So that's a good one. So let me go ahead and add that one then to ready to start. So that's in good shape. Excellent. All right. Let's kind of continue with the same mindset here. This again is, I think, is going to be blocked by this one. So Ron, this is what I was talking about before. So this is the basic offline experience. This is definitely, and this is the 200 response. This is definitely, I think, dependent on what we just talked about here. I guess the larger question is this something that should just be combined, or just consider this kind of a 2-for-1? Any thoughts on breaking this out? Is there any logic?
Before we talk about it, I pulled latest venue today and check out place order still doesn't work. Like I place order and I get console error. Is it already in backlog? Is it being worked on, or is it just I'm doing something wrong?
Right. So
it's in backlog. We have a known issue. Yeah.
Yeah. So something I mentioned to James today, we've got quite a few things that we still need to take a look at merging, but the one issue that you're probably encountering is the address. So for anyone who installs it right now, that we're going to take a look at that right now with regard to. I'll show you which one it is. So the thumbnail images is known, but this one is.
So these are all ready to work. And just my question was, if all of those smaller issues are already groomed and ready to work, or
they are. If it's a bug and it's well understood, and we have essentially steps to reproduce,
yeah.
we've assigned it and we've considered it at the very least ready to start.
Mm-hmm.
If there's questions, investigation, but of course, hopefully we'll get those to in progress. So that one in particular, though, we're taking a look at that right now.
Okay.
Yep. All right, so taking a look at the basic offline experience. Again, this one's bundled with what we just talked about. So I think there's certainly a dependency there. I guess the question though is there any value to having this as a separate story? What do you guys think?
I was going to say, I think the dependency is the other way around. Like this should be the first one, and then add to Homescreen comes after it.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I can be convinced. All right, let me just do the link on that one real quick. Sorry. Actually, I'll do the link. Let's kind of go through this one, but I want us to kind of go through some questions first while I do the link here in ZHum. So again, this one, at least as initially intended, was you want to have basic feedback on the storefront when your device is having connectivity issues or offline, so that you can have an uninterrupted shopping experience. And this is a requirement for Lighthouse and applies to all of the storefronts. So this is more universal than what we just talked about with add to Homescreen. Of course, is dependent on examples of the storefront, which is good. Dependent on the 200 response, which we've talked about. And I think for the purposes of this one, we don't have a UX for this one yet, but I think a placeholder scenario until that comes around is probably sufficient. The tasks themselves will be the discovery, implementation of a single example. So let's just take one of them and verify. If that works, let's go across, and of course, testing and documentation. So that was the intent when I created this initially before what we just reviewed. So, what's any thoughts, any questions on this one? All right, I'll let you think about that while I link that real quick in real time, because you guys know what the next question will be. All right. So while I link this, let's get the estimates going there. What does everybody think on the offline experience?
Boy, I actually think this might be pretty. I think this might be pretty simple. I mean, the way Workbox operates is that you just sort of whitelist a set of patterns to be permanently cached in the service worker. What you might run into is that if you're unaccustomed to working with and debugging service workers, then you're going to need to make sure that you enable service worker debugging, which is documented in the env example file, and that if you need to test again, that you need to use the Chrome developer tools to clear out the service worker and to unregister it. That's something you just have to learn once. So I would say this is on the small side, and I'll break protocol and say that I'll start the estimation at 3.
All right.
Am I crazy?
I don't know. I guess the things I would bump for this a little is dependent on the UI from Salmia, because I think you sort of have 2 primitives here. You want one which is an actual, like, I'm offline, we can't display this page, we need to show like a fallback page instead, and another which is like some in-page UI changes for you've lost connectivity and you've regained connectivity. Those are things we have examples of in the Workbox documentation and in other places, but I feel like that would probably bump this up to a 5.
Well, how about this, Rowan? So I think it was actually a great call out. So what if we clone this one? Because I have seen some work from Salmia on the in-page experience from that one. So I think is there a way that you could think of like handling this independently for this, but then maybe focus first on the fallback page for this one in particular? And so we clone this one, and the next one would be kind of in-page experience. Or do you think that's just kind of something that logically should follow?
If you're calling this one implement caching, like implement caching through Service Worker through Workbox, then yeah, it's a lot simpler.
Okay. And you would think, and that would in your mind still include the fallback page?
Yes, yeah, especially
so.
if this is a dependency for add to Homescreen as well, then you need that.
Yep. Yeah, I think from a business value standpoint, at least even having something placeholder would go a long way here. And then if we clone this one and that's something we can do next week, we can add that to in-page experience would just be basically blocked by this, but build upon it because there's the UI controls and things like that. So we can certainly add that. Cool. All right, so let me add that. So with that in mind, so as we discuss, does that change the 3, keep the 3, or make it a 5?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna say make it a 5. I'll defer there. Absolutely.
Got it. You guys see, I'm just clarifying this isn't page specific. So, all right, we got a 5 for this one.
I think in support of that 5, I would probably just add a note against the documentation that the documentation here should include some stuff around service worker debugging, because whilst it's not explicitly kind of venue related, I think it's still new enough that people all want some context there.
And building on that, is there anything, because I haven't looked at the Workbox documentation in a while, is there anything that we could leverage or reference as part of this, or do you expect this to be kind of net new?
Yeah, no, you should be able to reference a lot of this stuff. I think it's just one of those ones where people will inevitably, like James said, will inevitably run into this while they're working on it, and just having those answers right there for them is going to be helpful.
Yeah.
Okay. Makes sense. All right. So it feels like we're pretty locked in at a 5 here, so I think that's good. In terms of assignments, Paul, again, don't want to put you on the spot. I know this is pretty related to add to home, and so you may be blocking yourself. Is this something that you could potentially need some help on, or is that something that you guys could take on, or did you want to kind of take it offline and think about it a little bit?
Well, I've been looking into service workers and the web, what's it called? The
Lighthouse?
Lighthouse? No, the Google thing.
Workbox.
Oh my gosh, it's getting on the picture of Webpack. Yeah, so it's kind of, I've been looking into it and kind of doing stuff with it. This might be a little bit more than I can do right now, but if Zetlin and Rowan are going to help, then I'm all for it.
I at least am going to help. I imagine Rowan's doing a lot to get ready for Dev Summit.
And like 100 other events. But like I said, ping me on GitHub, and I'm more than happy to like either answer there or loop in other people who can answer.
Yep.
Okay.
Got it. Yeah, the only reason why I suggest it because it's so logically grouped, but this would definitely come even more so than some of the other ones with quite a bit of support because it's based on a workbox and some known entities there. So okay, very good. All right, well that's really it for this week, and we really covered quite a bit of stories. We've got a couple smaller ones that are less essential. Some things to look forward to are the mail templates for Venya. So out of the box Luma, there's just a couple quick art swaps there for anybody who's familiar with them too. We've got a couple fallbacks related to what we just talked about relative to offline experience. Those should be pretty straightforward once we get that, and a couple redirects as well. And so as you kind of see the trajectory that we're going towards for next month, the goal here is to get the fit and finish done for Venya relative to the 2.3 release. And once everything is merged and we continue to get help on some of those items, you'll see that all come to life, and kind of that last layer is going to be really addressing the PWA basics, right? We've got the good core, but we need that layer of the manifest and these other experiences that complement everything we've done today. And so that's really going to be the goal and the theme really for the next couple sprints. But as you can see, we're pretty full. We got a lot of things that can still be picked up. At this point, we've got 11 issues, totaling 36 points. So we'll start taking a look at that. And then we've got quite a few things that are in flight as part of certainly Sprint 27 right now, but then as we move to Sprint 28 next week for that one. So we've got plenty to work from. And of course, if you guys have any questions, comments, etc., just let us know. So anything else, any other questions or any other feedback before we close for the day?
I wanted to ask if there's a good place to point people towards that gives them an overview of what's going into like RC1 or the MVP and some roadmap ideas. Like I like the board, but this is very in-depth. Is there what's at a slightly higher level?
We did some MVP.
So
you go, Eric.
Go ahead,
It's a you question. I'm just trying to Yeah.
So one of the things we actually have behind the scenes that is often overlooked, we've got a pretty active roadmap here in what we've done and where we're going. So I am updating this relative to the 2.3 commits next month. And a lot of these are exactly what we're talking about. So we're already talking about things like Upward. I do think this can be simplified a little bit, and there's a couple little things here that we want to clean up. But all in all, I would say at least this moment's probably directionally correct. But one of my tasks for this week is to take a look at this and then initiate phase 3. And so essentially, this is a working roadmap based on at least our perceptions of the current velocity with the new feature team on board, who some of you probably starting to see some new faces on the grooming, but also anticipated community support here for the next 2 to 3 sprints for that one. So yeah, Rowan, I'd say this is a pretty good reference. And then in regular style, we've got some more business-friendly slides that we continue to make based on this one. But this is going to be our essentially our plan of record.
Nice. And is it, if you could scroll up for a minute?
Yeah, it's just the wiki for PWA Studio, and it's a page off of that called roadmap.
So phase 2 is basically in line with the 2.3 release.
Yes, exactly. Phase 1, the idea there was basically between where we were at the beginning of the year to basically ready for community contribution, which was shortly around the Imagine timeframe. So phase 2 is phase 2 where we're going to cut that as the 2.3 timeline in the next couple of weeks.
Cool. Thank you.
Yep. Great. Any other questions before we close? All right. Well, hey, great session, folks. Thank you again, as always, for all of your help, both here, both in the work, the feedback. It continues to be fantastic. So, as always, let us know if we can help. Have a great rest of your day, no matter where you are. And thanks again. Take care.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
Thank you, you too. Bye-bye.